Bangkok at night is a world of its own. The neon signs of Sukhumvit Road paint the streets in electric colors. Tuk-tuks hum through the maze of traffic, and the air is thick with the scent of street food and humid rain. But when the city's pulse slows, when the streets empty and the alleys fall silent, other stories begin to awaken. Stories that only the brave, or perhaps the foolish, ever get to tell. Somchai was a taxi driver who has seen it all. With over a decade behind the wheel, he knew every corner of Bangkok, every flickering neon sign, every sudden downpour. He thought nothing could surprise him anymore. Until one night, something did. It was just after midnight. Rain pattered against his windshield, a soft drumming rhythm against the low classical music murmuring from his radio. The streets were unusually deserted, cloaked in an eerie quiet that put even a veteran driver like him on edge. Then, at a dimly lit intersection near the Chatakak market, he saw her. A young woman, standing alone in the pouring rain. Her long black hair was plastered to her pale face, and her thin white dress was soaked through, clinging to her slender frame. She raised a hand, a small, hesitant gesture, flagging him down. Somchai slowed his taxi, squinting through the sheets of rain. There was something unsettling about her stillness, but the thought of leaving a woman alone on a deserted street at this hour made him stop. As she opened the door, a soft, almost whispery voice asked, "Taxi?" It was polite, but it held a strange, unnatural quality. He shrugged it off and unlocked the passenger door. "Where to, miss?" he asked, trying to sound cheerful. She paused for a moment, her gaze fixed on the wet road ahead. "The outskirts. Near the canal," she said finally. He nodded and pulled away from the curb. As she settled into the back seat, he noticed her hair. It was impossibly long, cascading well past her waist, dripping dark pools of water onto his leather seats. A shiver ran down his spine. He decided to glance at her in the rearview mirror just to check if she was okay, and that's when his world tilted. That's when he realized. Her head, it wasn't there. He could see her long black hair falling perfectly over her shoulders and chest, but where her face and head should have been, there was nothing. Just the pale, empty space above her neck. Somchai's stomach plummeted. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the steering wheel. He blinked hard, trying to clear his vision. It had to be a trick of the light, the rain, the sheer exhaustion of a long night. "Just a hallucination," he muttered, his voice trembling. He forced himself to take a deep breath, to focus only on the road ahead. But then she spoke. "Are you afraid?" Her voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, as if it were floating in the mist of her own hair. It was soft, melodic, and it made every hair on Somchai's body stand on end. I'm just driving," he stammered, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Are you alone?" she asked, her tone unchanged. "Yes," he replied instantly, his voice tight with fear. Her hair seemed to shift slightly, a slow, deliberate movement, even though the car windows were closed. "Good," she whispered. "Because I like it when people are alone with me." The rain suddenly intensified, beating down on the roof like a funeral drum. The familiar city streets began to narrow, twisting into dark, unfamiliar roads. The taxi's headlights struggled to cut through the oppressive darkness. Somchai desperately tried to keep his eyes on the road, but his gaze kept flicking to the rearview mirror. Each time the same horrifying image greeted him, a headless figure shrouded in long dark hair. Panic was a physical thing, clawing at his throat. He had to stop the car, he had to tell her to get out. But before he could form the words, the road bent sharply. And then he felt it. An icy presence, impossibly close, brushing against the back of his neck. A faint whisper, like wind sighing through bamboo, tickled his ear. "Almost there," she said. His vision tunneled. The few streetlights that lined the road flickered erratically, then one by one they went out, plunging them into near total darkness, save for the faint red glow of his dashboard. He risked one more glance in the mirror. She was closer now. He hadn't heard or seen her move, but she was leaning forward, her hair swaying unnaturally, as if it were floating in deep water. Suddenly, the taxi jolted violently, the tires slipping on the wet asphalt. Somchai gripped the wheel with all his might, fighting to keep control. And just as abruptly as it began, the rain stopped. The world outside fell into an eerie, profound silence, and she was gone. Somchai's eyes widened in disbelief. The passenger seat was empty. A small pool of water was all that remained where she had been sitting. The long dark hair had vanished. His mouth was desert dry. His heart was thudding so loudly he was sure it would burst from his chest. He looked around frantically, but the streets were utterly deserted. No people, no sounds. For a few long moments, the only things he could hear were the hum of his engine and his own ragged, shallow breaths. Then he heard it. A faint, soft brushing sound from the back seat. Like hair being dragged across leather. He spun around, his eyes wide with terror. There was nothing there. Only the cold mist that had crept into the car through a slightly open window. He tried to rationalize it. A dream, exhaustion, an elaborate prank. But deep down, in the pit of his stomach, he knew the truth. She wasn't human. Somchai slammed his foot on the accelerator. He drove faster than he ever had before, his heart racing, his mind on fire. Every shadow cast by the trees seemed to writhe and move. Every puddle on the road seemed to reflect her long, swaying hair just behind him. He finally reached the canal area she had requested. The streetlights here flickered weakly, illuminating a thick, swirling mist. He slammed on the brakes, his body shaking with adrenaline. The back seat was empty, no dress, no water. No sign of her at all, except for one thing. Lying on the dark leather seat, a single wet strand of impossibly long black hair. It curled slightly at the end, as if it were still alive. Somchai never touched it. He threw the car into reverse and sped away. He never took that route at night again. Locals in Bangkok still whisper about the long-haired girl in the taxi. Some say she was the victim of a tragic accident decades ago, her body so mangled it was never properly laid to rest. Others believe she's a spirit who wanders the lonely roads at night, searching for lone drivers, appearing as a beautiful young woman with long hair, but no head. They say drivers who see her often find she vanishes the moment they look in the rearview mirror. Some are so shaken by the encounter, they never drive at night again. As for Somchai, he only drives in the daylight now. He refuses all night fares. And every time he has to pass that fateful intersection, a cold dread washes over him. He imagines her long hair falling over the seat, imagines her invisible eyes watching him, and he can almost hear her whisper, "Are you afraid yet?" So, if you ever find yourself in a taxi in Bangkok late at night, when the rain is falling, and you see a pale girl with long black hair standing all alone, maybe it's best to just keep driving, because once she's inside your car, she rides with you, until she chooses to disappear. And by then, it might already be too late. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more strange stories. Stay safe out there.